For many current and aspiring leaders in software development, one of your most critical jobs will be to hire great people, galvanize them into a motivated, hardworking team, and keep them going through ups and downs. You'll then be affected by a number of external factors, company changes, the external market, competition, delivery pressures. Then internally, you're going to have people that love it, people who don't, people who lack motivation, those disgruntled with the company or their job, people leaving, people starting. The balancing act of trying to keep a group of people together, motivated and performing effectively, intertwined with the need to build a team while you build your project, is no easy task. This episode, we want to discuss all of that. We've got some brilliant people who have done this in both the best of times and the worst of times to give you their perspectives and any hints and tips that can help you ride the roller coaster of technical leadership. Welcome everyone to what is going to be a wonderful episode of Humans of the Silicon Age. I am your host, Christopher Logan. We have some wonderful people here today that I am super excited to hear wisdom from. Tara Rhodes is a certified leadership coach and an award-winning trainer. She is currently the Director of Leadership Development for Leaders at Scale in Toronto. Welcome, Tara. So excited to have you on today.
Super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Joseph Fuller has been building teams in the US, Australia, and Asia Pacific for over 10 years. He's currently the head of IT for Linktree in Sydney. Welcome, Joseph. Thanks for being on.
Thank you so much. Super excited.
Myron Parks is an enterprise strategic agilist certified in enterprise agility and strength-based leadership. He's a principal agile coach at PartnerStack in Toronto. Also, welcome, Myron. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on.
I'm so glad to be here, Chris. Long time. Looking forward to it.
Long time. Divya's been in the software development industry for over 18 years, is currently an engineering manager for safety culture in Sydney. Divya, cannot wait to hear what you have to say today.
Thank you, Christopher. I think this is really my first one as well, and looking forward to have a good discussion with everyone.
Awesome. So today we are talking about how to build amazing teams. What do they look like? How do we maintain them? How do we hire for them, et cetera, et cetera? This is a topic that we can really talk about for days endlessly, and we'll do follow-up shows on it. So let's jump straight in. What is the real difference between good, great, and amazing? And let me throw it out to anyone who wants to start talking about that.
Well, I think first, to really define team, it's not just people who come together that do things and then separate. We could define teams like that, but generally it's about people who are interdependent and rely on each other to do really great work, right? So we're doing things together. We have shared knowledge of what that looks like, and we're talking about it openly on a regular basis. So I would say good is we have a shared understanding, but maybe aren't actually doing it on a regular basis. Where great is we're talking about things openly, we're interdependent, we know we can go directly to who is on the team. And I think amazing is doing that on a consistent basis and delivering results on a consistent basis.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. I think I want to emphasize on that part of delivering consistently. That's a very important part of an existence of the team. Team comes together to deliver something. We have a common goal. I think how we judge whether it's an amazing team or a great team or a good team is based on how quickly can we deliver. And so the team is made out of fast thinkers, and then forward thinkers. Like, can we think about upcoming 6 months? Are we seeing it? And also, is there any fear for failure? Like, are we holding us ourselves? Or how focused are we on the quality side? So those key things define whether we are performing as an amazing team or a good team, or just we come together as a team.
Myron, I'm sure you got something to say here, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we were talking in a pre-show about Elon Musk. So Elon Musk says, a company is a group of individuals who get together to do something they believe in. Now, I don't know if that's an actual belief, But I do believe in that philosophy. So it starts with the individual. A good team is a team of people who are getting together, typically like within the same craft, to get something done. They're effective, like what you were saying, Divya. They're effective. They get things done, and they don't fail typically. Like they can get moderate success. A great team is a team that is cross-functional, interdependent, like what you were saying, Tara. Like they feed off of each other and they grow and they learn, and there's some cross pollination. They understand what's necessary for the thing that they're doing to work, so they pitch in. An amazing team is like an A team. They come from different specialties. They come together and they focus on what needs to be done. But when they get together, kind of like a special forces team, they learn to do amazing, impossible things together, like from that point on. So if there's an engineer and a designer, when they get together and they learn how to make design systems and scale them. That is an amazing team.
Joseph, you've been building teams in various different countries. Do you see a difference between those sorts of definitions?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I'm taking notes here quietly because I think Tara and Divya and Myron all had way better answers that I was going to just mumble out with. So, like, I'm just kind of happy to be here. I think there's a couple of things to think about it, right? Like, I think those are all absolutely true. But I think, to me, an amazing team goes through all of those journeys multiple times over. So if you have like a specialist team in tech, right, like what makes an amazing team that's, let's say, a really specialized technical delivery team or like an SRE type team, right? They're amazing because their jobs don't really change all that much. They're doing that same kind of thing and just kind of like being like a marathon runner. You hit your stride and you know how to do it. You know how to run the same every single day. And it's not necessarily a matter of can you run or how do you run? It's just when do I kind of get to my stride and have that perfect kind of, moment of performance? And that's with like a very mature team. I on my side of the fence have run more kind of chaos driven teams, right? Starting from either like building from zero or, standing up a new function in a different part of the world. And so, you'll have this one part of the team have this really immature, brand new kind of, hey, where's the bathroom kind of like new people on board. And then you have this other mix of people that are veterans, seasoned, really know how to do it. And maybe they kind of have like that kind of specialist role, And so I think, at least in my side of the fence, I think all those things can be true. And I see those things kind of run multiple times over. Or, in my case, because my side of technology changes just so frequently, so quickly all the time. You can be an expert one day, and then the next minute you're suddenly completely brand new, completely green in this brand new thing. And you've got to figure out how to become an expert faster than everyone else realizes you're not. And so I think that, your kind of basic things around being kind of clear alignment and purpose, right? Like a clear collaboration, clear ability to communicate, right? Like, can we give each other, critical feedback in a way that's respectful and productive? Those are all the kind of hallmarks of a really great team. And I think you see those things really early on. And those are the things that kind of lead to those kind of buzzwords around collaboration and, working to a high standard and all those things. But I think my perspective is just that every team goes through this cycle all the time. And I've yet to see one that just is always locked in at one state or the other. And I think that's where sometimes maybe the messaging gets lost, but I think that's inherently a good thing.
Yeah. Look, actually, rarely have I considered a great team or an amazing team too much around exactly what they are delivering. Whether they're delivering the thing that they were meant to, at least for me personally, is almost beside the point. Because I've always felt like an amazing team is a group of people who will surprise you, who will do things you didn't even think of. You didn't even consider that they were even capable of doing this thing or thinking this way. And it's a group of people who can almost self-sustain. And so anytime I've led a group, particularly in the early days when it was just one team or two teams, when as a leader, if you can move off, if you can disappear, and that team is even better, that's always like the hallmark to me of a group of people who really have their shit together and who know what they're doing and who will excel. And there's always someone or some persons in the team who will step up, and move forward. And it's almost like a self-sustaining perpetual motion machine at that point.
Right.
And that's kind of what I've always seen as an amazing team who doesn't need the management aspect of the team. It's a group who will just constantly surprise you with what they can come up with, what they can invent, and how they can go forward.
I think that's absolutely the hallmark of a great leader or a great manager, right? The old saying goes, being a good leader isn't when you leave, everything goes to shit and you're this kind of like, dependable employee that can't possibly be lost. The mark of a good leader is when you leave or you go on vacation, everything runs just fine. People forget that you were gone, right? Like that's the mark of a true leader, that you build these kind of teams and these sustainable systems that function without your physical presence, right? Or without your daily presence. And that's a good thing. And then in engineering, right? Like I think the kind of negative appearance of that is, you have the creation of what I call Atlas engineers, and they're the engineers that think the weight of the world's on their shoulders and that they can't possibly take a break. They're these kind of like hallmark members that if they go on vacation, the whole thing explodes. And that to me is the mark of a very bad situation and a very bad team, right? And so absolutely agree with your point there that like the mark of a good leader is that things function and go on and in fact improve without you being there, because you've done the hard yards to set up frameworks, to set up kind of like the right paths forward for your team to go without you necessarily having to be, in the front pulling them along.
Tara, you're a leadership coach. Let me turn it over to you.
Yeah. I actually want to highlight that point, the building and the cultivating, because I think there's a lot of people who believe that, if I just hire great people, then I'm a great leader. And there's so much work that goes into before I can go on vacation, before I leave, that these systems have been built, that I have invested in the people that I work with, that we are clear about when it's great, when it's not great, how do we improve? I'm constantly asking questions. I am constantly showing the way that I think. I am asking how their weekend was, not because it's the top of the hour and it's a great way to start a meeting. It's because I genuinely care about what is going on. And I hope that, especially in this time where we have had so much go on over the last 2 years, that people really are taking more stock of the people that they work with, because the lines are blurred. And so it's really important that I think leaders are taking into account that building great teams isn't just hiring great people who will know what to do. It really does take someone with hands-on in it experience to make sure that people are coming along with them, because that is one of the definitions of leadership, is that someone's following you. But really, it's more that you're influencing in the right way and you're not manipulating.
Yeah. Divya, look, you've also worked in a whole bunch of different companies in different countries. Do you see that is different depending on where you work?
When it comes to team, I think it's the same, irrespective of where do you work and who is in the team. I think everyone, the basic of a team is the same. Everyone would want to be heard and would want to contribute, and then their level of commitment is what makes the team. And I think it's small things that there are differences in how they say things, like how do they surface problems, how do they take feedback. There are difference in that part of human side, depending on their background. But as a team, the functionality of the team remains the same. The expectation from the team remains the same as and I think it also, irrespective of the background, it's also the individual. How do they take failures? How do they respond to failures? And is the difference in the that I have noticed? Yeah.
That's awesome points. The feedback and failures thing is super important.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the thing that you said, Divya, is really important. Is like, and this is kind of like what I'm putting together. What Tara said about like nurturing, or just bringing people with you, right? I worked in the United States as well as Canada, and The difference is there are cultural differences, right? What does nurturing a person look like? What does bringing someone forward look like? Well, in the United States, bringing someone forward, it may be like, look, man, get your shit together, dude. Like, come on, like what's going on? In other places where, for example, in, my understanding is that in Canada, like respect is super important. It's not so much in the United States, right? Like, and so bringing people forward, moving people with you, like influence, the word that you use, Tara, influence is the really, really key thing. So there are cultural aspects, and I would add, as a strengths coach, the person matters, and so that individual also has needs. What nurturing means for me is, for example, super different than what my brother needs from a leader.
Right. Yeah.
Literal brother,
That's
not brother, like my literal brother. I got the first laugh of the show.
Yeah, well, I feel like we're gonna have a problem when we're on the same show, because your laugh is really loud and so is mine, and everyone's ears are just gonna freaking burst. At some I
actually think that's a really good point that Myron brought up, though. I mean, it's something that I've genuinely struggled with being in Australia and in Asia. I say sometimes that I'm very aggressively American at times, especially with the way that I deliver feedback, right? I deliver it in a very direct, very focused way, right? And, frankly, some people can kind of interpret that as being an asshole. And that's not the case necessarily, right? My thing is I've had some really great leaders that have given me very clear and direct feedback. And to my own point, it's very much hey, dude, you need to get your shit together. You stacked this. I'm like, yeah, I really did. They're like, okay, well, don't do it again. You're like, yeah, okay, got it. Loud and clear. But especially as I've been out here in Australia and especially in Asia, like in Japan, you can't particularly give someone that feedback in that way, right? Japan is 1,000 different ways of honorifics and respect and kind of coaching and development is extremely different. And then in Singapore, it's the same, right? In Singapore, you have this really weird kind of perception of, oh, well, you're an expat, you must know what you're doing. You know what I mean? Or you must know more than we do. And that's not the case at all. You're just kind of there because, you're sent there to be there and to do this certain thing. But so it's one thing that I have genuinely struggled with as a leader, especially in Australia, where the relationship between work and personal life is very different than the US. In the United States, we tend to define a lot of our own self-worth out of what we do, our job title, and what we do professionally. And so it's something that I have genuinely struggled with as a leader on how to kind of bridge that gap. And it's probably made me more empathetic and better. And it's not that I lacked empathy prior. It's just I've had to work really hard to show it in a very different way. And it's something that I still have to actively battle through as a leader today, running a multicultural and diverse team. It's way easier, in my opinion, or my experience, to run a team of Americans.
One thing I have noticed, depending on their culture, there is some level of resistance when it comes to asking help. Like some people are really good in asking for help, and sometimes I also look at that in my team. How are they taking help from each other? How are they communicating with each other? Because that also defines an amazing team, right? So one way we look at it is how quickly PRs get reviewed is one of the metric that we look at, and that's mainly comes to the communication and comes to asking for help to get their feedback, review feedback for their code change. And what I noticed is some people are very comfortable in giving a shout out and getting that help, whereas some people just wait there until next day morning stand up and bring it up in the stand up that I was waiting for feedback. And it's like, you could have just asked for help. And sometimes I have also noticed when big problems happen, they try to find the answer for it by themselves, because I think asking for help is somehow seen as something that lowers their self esteem for some reason. So that kind of related to culture, I guess. Yeah.
So that's a super interesting point. And there's two things that you said before about failures and feedback that I think is worth delving into, because the hallmarks of teams, and particularly when you fail. Oh, you've already got the team. Is there like a whole bunch of T-shirts that you just like every episode you're going to bring
They're
on?
just right here. Like this is.
No. What you should do is just wear like 20 of them, and every time we come up with a new topic, it's like this one.
No, it's got to be like the guy from 30 Rock that has a different hat every episode, like a different words on the hat every episode.
I have so many hats.
You know what I mean? Like it's just a subtle reference, each time, like $5. I'd support that.
Sorry, I did not mean to interrupt. It was just really funny.
No, that was far more entertaining than whatever I was going to say. The common view for what is a good team or a great team or an amazing team is probably the fact that the team never fails, that there is never a downtime, that there is never we did this wrong or this isn't going right. And so what I want to understand, and from your perspective, is can an amazing team fail and still be an amazing team?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I hope they're failing.
In fact, I would say if you're not failing, you're failing.
You're not trying hard.
I think
that needs a T-shirt.
It's a T-shirt.
An amazing team is amazing what they do when they fail. How do they come back defines the amazing team. Because we are going through a lot of issues at my place. That's how I see my team doing amazing things, like we are on a Zoom call trying to fix customer problems, and how we work as a team is defining how quickly we can respond to those issues.
Yeah, and from a failure perspective, like when I'm running the release process or service transition for a bank that has multiple different things, what I do is I have the teams go and certify the things so that when there are failures, like actually the decision that I make, one of the inputs or the most important input for the decision of when we're ready to launch is how long does it take them to fix problems? When the team gets to the point that they can fix problems in like a day or less, we're ready to launch because the recovery is actually more important.
Yep.
And so an amazing team, when it breaks, they know what to do. Everyone. They know who to call. If this person's on vacation, that's one of the things that I ask leaders when I talk with them. When was the last time you were on vacation? And if they tell me they've never been on vacation, then they're not building amazing teams. Because a team doesn't know who to call. Right? They don't know who you transition the pager to. Those are the things that fall apart when a team is in some ways held back from being amazing. So the leadership is a component of that.
Tara, when you
I look at it. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Joseph. Go.
No. I was going to say, I look at failure as kind of like a mark of success, right? Because like first off, I want to know the why. Okay, something happened, something failed. Why, right? If it's the same thing that's failing, that's a different problem than failure in and of itself. I think if you're not failing, it means you're not setting ambitious enough projects and goals and tasks, because failure is inevitable, right? It's the whole aim for the stars, land on the moon, and like it's something that I really encourage my teams that when they're building something I was like, okay, well, make sure you have a bit of whimsy in here. What's your 20% project, going to be this month or this quarter? What's just something bonkers that would be really cool if we pull it off? But if not, oh well, but you learn something, right? And at the end of the day, it's the whole ethos of trying to make new mistakes every day. The problems happen when you're making the same mistakes every single day. And I think that failure is a true mark of a team that trusts one another to then do the kinds of things that have a risk of failure. If you're only doing the things that are only going to be 100% success rates, you're not really doing anything that's going to push anything forward. You're just keeping the lights on with a little bit of extra gloss.
Right. Yeah. Now, if you're in managed services, right, and like things have to stay, because
okay,
right?
Well then you have to keep it up. Yeah, I mean, like failure is actually not an option. Then, yeah,
right.
Like okay, all right, SpaceX.
But like, go on, Tara.
I love. Sorry, I wanted to bring up, because I feel this is related to what was just spoken about in the last little bit, where now we're starting to get into psychological safety, because that is the foundation of being able to take risks, is that I know I'm not going to get yelled at. One example, right? I know that I can talk about this with my boss. I know where to go. I know that actually I'm empowered to make the decision, even if I may not know all the steps, but I know that how our team works, and I know I can go to that. But we all have different levels of what interpersonal risk looks like, even if the team is actually psychologically safe and the leader has invested in it. As you were saying, culturally, there's so many cultures around the world that failure is not an option. And so how do we actually bring in those perspectives as well, so that, when we say, oh, they should have just asked for help, or they could have just asked for help. Well, yeah, they could have. Well, what was getting in their way? And this is where I think a really great leader will start to uncover and unpack those things. Of course, they're not therapists and will not get into their whole journey of how to get there. But I think it's really important that we start to surface, why didn't you ask for help? What would have been failure been to you? For me, it might have been, I got one thing wrong. For someone else, it's 20 things wrong. Who knows, right? And so I think we do need to uncover a lot more. It's not just failure is cool. We have cool t-shirts, Myron, right? And it's on the wall, and it's a really cool value that we all subscribe to. We all still have very different levels. Like you said, your brother has a very different level of comfort than you. And what do they need is a really important conversation to have on these teams as well.
So I want to come back to what is it that makes an amazing team? Is it based because what we're drawing away from is less about their results and more about the group of people and the psychology of that group of people, really. We're all in building technology. And when you build software or when you build hardware, particularly in the SaaS world, what matters is building fast, reiterating, innovating, and knowing that it is going to fail. Knowing that there is going to be a break, there is going to be something that you put out there because you are doing it so quickly that it is more important to be more dynamic, to be able to make change, to be able to do something new than it is for that thing to always be up. Now, obviously, it depends on what specific thing that you're building, and it's not life-threatening. A team is kind of the same, right? In terms of an amazing team can often then be defined by do they feel safe in the group? Do they feel like they can have a say? Do they feel like they can fail and that they can actually grow in it? And there's no growth if there's no feedback and there's no path of communication. But I feel like we've kind of touched on something that isn't a common understanding. You could go to, 100 different CEOs and heads of departments and ask them who their best team is. They're probably going to pick the one that delivers the best results, right? Not the one that is the most dynamic or the safest or the one with the best culture. Then they're probably not going to answer that way. Then does that mean that we have to, that the culture and the pretense of what that is needs to change? Because in the business world, that's very much not really the case.
I'd like to start in saying one thing on that I think that people get wrong or maybe they miss is that I think something that I know that I have a very unique focus on, but where I think teams go wrong is that a lot of teams that are considered successful or high-performing teams actually have lost sight of who their customer is. And I think that without a relentless focus on a customer, and it doesn't matter who that customer is, but a lot of teams actually don't know who their customer is. So it's really easy for me to say, yeah, I know about this because I run corporate IT teams, right? Everyone in the company is my customer. And in fact, the company itself is my customer. And even some of the product customers can often be my customers, right? So, we touch everybody in the company very carefully and make sure that we kind of never lose sight of the fact that what we do matters. But I think when you have really technical teams, they can lose sight of that. Like who is an SRE's customer? You know what I mean? Who's a delivery team's customer in a bank, right? I have to keep this one service online and it just handles transactions, right? But when companies get to a certain size and scale, they have a tendency to abstract away their customers. And that's where I think you start creating the kinds of environments that I think Tara touched on, and you just kind of mentioned here, Chris, about how, those teams, like what really defines a good team, like how do you do these things? And I think the hallmarks of the teams that struggle with that have simply just lost sight of who their customer is, or they don't care. And at the end of the day, I think one of the most important things that we have to do as a leader, but let alone a company should be doing, is this constant and relentless focus on who your customer is and how your work matters. And that's, I think, a huge bit of satisfaction that everyone can derive, in their job about what they do. Because at the end of the day, it's really easy to disengage and to not care, and then to let other kind of things in life, kind of pull you away from things. If you don't feel that what you do matters, or what kind of like what your impact is just kind of not appreciated, or just doesn't really contribute to the main. And that's something that I think a lot of companies, especially tech companies, do a really poor job about, because it is all about that relentless ship of a feature. It's move faster, kind of break things sort of, but not too badly, and I think that without that focus, that's where you start seeing teams and companies go off the rails.
Yeah. Like, two questions that I hear a lot when working with startup founders and leaders are, what's next? Speaking of the people are coming to grips with the fact that the way of the world, the world of work is changing, like irrevocably. It's changed. And the second thing that they ask is, what for? Like, why does it matter? Like, just doing this thing, like if today is my last day, and I hate to get really dark, is that thing that I was doing, does that matter? And so while most established businesses, particularly businesses that are leading in salary and benefits and things of that nature, they're insulated from this reality for a while. But like, the reality is that the companies and the purpose has to line up with what people, want to do next. It has to be valuable for individuals to do this work.
And Joseph, your point about that customer focused team is super important, because particularly in tech, I've always found the best groups, the best teams are absolutely the ones who know who they were building for and why they are doing it, and why the person who is the end customer for that, why they even give a shit really about what you're building. Because ultimately, when you're building technology, the technology isn't the thing you're building. It's the utility of the technology that you are building. It's who uses it, what is it good for, how is it going to make the world a better place, or whatever it is.
Yeah, why does it matter?
Absolutely, why does it matter? Well documented. You'll find a million videos of why does Apple keep succeeding, right? And why did they succeed in back in the Steve Jobs days, right? And it's because they were selling the vision and the feeling of owning an Apple product, right? What does that feel like to have a MacBook? What does it feel like to have an iPhone? What does it feel like to have an iPod back in the day? What does it feel like to have an iPad, right? When the iPad came on, I could not understand why the hell anyone would want a freaking iPad. And now everyone's got an iPad. But building software is exactly the same. You're building something for someone else to make them feel good, or to make their lives easier, or to make their job better. And the team that knows that and constantly has that in the back of their head can not only build the right thing, but know if they're building the wrong thing. That's where I at least I feel like that is a real difference between an amazing team and an average team. Is, do they know when they're doing the wrong thing? Do they know when they're wasting their time, or they're going in a direction that isn't going to help anybody? And that's one of those things that I don't think ever really gets talked about. Like there's not a lot of here's how not to engineer sort of books or videos or references.
Sounds like I've got a book to write.
Tara, when you coach leaders, in terms of that understanding of why they're doing those things, how much does that play in their psyche and the ability to make them better?
I love that you've touched upon this because all of our decisions are emotional. We like to think that we're logical and rational, but really it has nothing to do with it. We tell ourselves that it's rational. So it always is about the feeling. It's about, why am I here? What is the purpose? I know I'm going really existential right now, but really that's what's underneath it all. What do you want? Nobody wants to be at the end of their life being like, I built really great things. They want to talk about who it was for. They want to talk about the impact that they had, who they spent time with, all of that, right? And maybe building great things was a part of it, which is fine, right? But really, we're talking about how we're seen, how we want to be perceived. What does that look like? And so when I'm talking with leaders, I really want people to talk about vision. I want them to talk about where are they going, because the only way to know how to get there is to know where you are going first and talk about that. But underneath all of that is more about having the right people in the right seats, actually, because I think where the tension lies is that most people start out their careers wanting to do really great work. And the direction that they're getting are from the people who still subscribe to what you were saying, which is shareholders are our customer. Shortcuts are the thing that we need to do. Speed is the focused metric. And so quality goes down when those things happen. And unfortunately, if that was your first, second, third job, you will have taken that as that is leadership. And so what we're seeing right now is a huge tension between people who really are driven by purpose and then a lot of old school people who were brought up in that way of thinking and still are trying to be like shareholder, 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 short-term, quarterly, and getting it wrong, really.
Particularly when you work for a company, a public company, right? That is the whole purpose of the company at that point. Once you go public, it is your responsibility is not to your customers anymore. It is to the shareholder at that.
So it's a real challenge. Like, I don't want to say that as like, okay, forget all the money. That's not my intention here. But I think that really is where we are starting to see heads coming together or against each other, because I think people who are younger than me really are like, money is ruining our planet. And like, these are the things that I hear in coaching sessions. They're really bucking against this. I'm not here to make money and buy homes and just be stuck in one city forever and work for one organization like maybe my parents did, right? Like, they want to explore more. They want to experience more. And so there really is, I would say, a cultural disconnect. Maybe a lot of that has to do with like age and generation as well, about what's important at work and who are we actually answering to. And are we willing to challenge our assumptions on it? I'm not saying one is necessarily right or wrong, but how do we have a conversation about what is important? And given that maybe shareholder growth is important, well, how do we still stick to our customers are important too? And can those two things be equal at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's an amazing point, right? And it's one of the best ways that I've ever heard someone say that. I think part of it's communication, right? There's always been this massive battle between shareholders and companies. And a lot of times, right, like what I think about often is what's the difference with Amazon and say another tech company, right? Amazon was basically upfront being like, we're going to take your money and we're just going to set it on fire. Please give us more. And we're just going to keep setting it on fire because we're going to put these big bets over here. We're going to play this. But ultimately, I am just going to, spend your money like I do not care, right? Like, and there's all the kind of like Bezosisms and like the letters and all. But what happens out of that, right? Like, is it 10 years later, you've got an AWS? 10 years later, you've got, these crazy like AI and machine learning things. 10 years later, you've got all this kind of stuff. And so the market's always very short term. It's always very focused on, what are you doing for me now? Increase my dividend, please. Thanks much. And so what's the difference between a company like Amazon that seems to have a reality distortion field that you can just be like, give us all of your money and we might do something with it, but you're probably not going to see it again, like versus another company who's like, please, sir, please, can I have some gold coins for my one feature release, right? Like, and they're just like, absolutely not. You know what I mean? Like, and they get punished for it. And I think there is that disconnect between vision and being able to communicate, hey, what we're doing is going to be a big bet. It's going to take time. But if we pull it off, right, like it's going to be something great, right? Is that a communication thing? Is that like a lack of vision, right? Like, what is that gap between these people that are like, I want to live as a digital nomad and I want to be able to travel and work from wherever, but I also want to make a shitload of cash and do all these things that like social media says I'm supposed to be doing. And then the other group of people that are just like, a job is a job. I learned how to be a manager through AT&T. Not that there's anything wrong with AT&T, but you know, that kind of classic mega corporation. And they're the ones that, exactly to your point, who you just talked about, that are like, this is my job. My purpose is to go in here. I do my job. I leave at 6 p.m. and that's okay. And like, how do we bridge the gap between those people? Because there's a massive cohort in the market that's still in the workplace, right? And they do have like great skills and things to bring to any team, but at the same time, without having, you know, a bunch of super young people that come in there and want to kind of like, you know, murder everyone who doesn't think, you know, that like you can work from a jet ski and whenever you want with Wi-Fi, right? So what's the middle ground here?
Right. Like having that vision, being able to tell the story, being able to connect the purpose of what you're trying to do. Like when you are interviewing someone for a role, like when I'm interviewing for people for a role, I actually do a reverse interview and I have them interview me. And I actually compete against other leaders in the space. I give them stats. I tell them, boom, 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 I know. And then I sell the vision of what we're doing to them. I find out two things from that. One, what's their value add? Like, because people will tell you when you ask them, hey, here's what we're trying to do. Like, is that cool? Like, what would you like to do as a part of that? Oh, I love this piece. And like being able to do things like that, particularly since Amazon, the name was brought up, you're not going to compete as a leader for talent against Amazon. So you have to be super clear for your purpose because the expectations are different. People are just leaving in hundreds of thousands from companies that aren't willing to tell them, hey, where are we going next? Like they're not willing to answer that question.
Every time someone says something, I have to write down like 20 different notes about what to follow up. So you're making it really hard for me. So I just wanted to point that out. And I'm running out of pages in my notebook, and my cat's sitting on it too, so it makes it all difficult. Let me rewind a little bit. Metrics came up, and we haven't talked about metrics for what a great team is yet. So I want to throw it to Myron, because Myron, you coach teams, you live this day in, day out, looking at like how to make them better. What is your view in terms of how, like, what are the metrics for a great team?
I want to give one metric for like the output, and a few a measure like an assessment, and a metric that I would use to evaluate the health of a team. In addition to actually talking with a team and checking in on them and making sure that they have growth and development that is tied to their internal, like their intrinsic purpose in life. So those are the sort of preamble things. But from an output perspective, I actually look for teams that can get to before a release, even if that release is 1,000 times a day, if they've agreed that the standard of care is that we can fix anything in about a day, and they do that consistently, so I'm looking at the efficacy of that team over time, then that's a great team. Because when there are problems, they know what to do. That tells me that communication is happening and the team is learning. One of the other metrics that I look at, or the reason that I check that with those issues, is I actually check like if they can do it within a day, but as they're finding issues, I'm looking to make sure that slope comes down, so that on a scatter plot, it tells me that when that number of days gets down to 1 or essentially like 0, waiting more time is not going to do anything. And so they can do that, and that the team can do that over and over again. That's a metric. Problems solving. The assessment I would do is I would do, and I'm biased in this, I would do a strengths-based coaching analysis on them. And I would actually identify like the thought patterns, like what things people need to have the most high quality life, the satisfaction in the work that they do, that is tied to how they think, the things they enjoy, and like just literally almost like their core person. And I identify those things so that when there's work that needs to be done, I can provide them with opportunities outside of the day-to-day that are aligned with their growth and development goals. Now, I like to use employee NPS, Net Promoter Score, ENPS, Employee Net Promoter Score. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. But generally speaking, if you have an ENPS that sustains around, I would say around 40, you have a team that's performing very well, and they're going to be able to really, really handle a lot of stress and challenges together. And the ENPS is taken for different things as well. So, for example, if you're cross-functional, I would have people of a particular practice do NPS. All right, would you recommend this like being a software engineer or a coach to a friend or a colleague, as well as company or team or project or product or whatever, so that you can segment what is causing problems. And as the coach leader, and I'm going to introduce leader as a coach, the concept here, trademark or whatever by Gallup or whatever. If you're doing those things, you can have an incredible team. And by the way, the leader is on the team too. And so those ENPS measures are more a reflection on the leadership of the organization.
Thanks for the term coach leader, because I was looking for a better term than servant leader. This is much better because that's what I do, Yeah.
I cannot stand the term servant. I hate it. I hate it with a passion. And I'm pretty sure everyone I've ever worked with has known that I hate it with a passion.
Now,
I don't understand it. I don't get it.
Now, to be clear, Chris, you don't hate servant leadership. I'm assuming that you hate the jargonization of it.
I hate yeah, let me clarify before I get hate mail or whatever the hell
Chris
else I'm
hates
going to
servant leadership. What?
Chris hates
just downvoted to oblivion because Chris decided he hates servants.
Yes.
Wow, what a hot take.
I just added a marker so you can find that clip faster, Chris.
Oh, nice. And I can cut it out, or I'll just make a 30-second video of me just saying it, and then see what happens.
That's the thumbnail right there. Chris hates servant leadership? Question mark. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just a photo of you being like this. You got to do the YouTube thumbnails, right? Like, statistically speaking, they get better views.
Shades come down. Yes.
So,
I didn't mean to start this.
Can I disagree? Like, just for a second, just another perspective on it, because I fully get the jargonization of it. I think for me, when you think servant leadership, it's more of like a posture, whereas like being a coach is really highly situational. Because sometimes coaching isn't what is needed. You can start there and you want to ask questions, but sometimes you just have to say it. There's no figuring it out. It's like, this is what needs to happen right now. It's just me telling you. And so I think just the idea that servant leadership is about being with others and asking them how to grow and saying, how can I help you, is more of just, I think, more purpose-filled or more like mission-driven rather than just what's needed in the moment.
Yeah, I think I'm the odd person out that actually has a disdain for kind of metrics and KPIs on measurement, but I think that's very different from the teams that I run. And I think, to your point, honestly, I am like the top tier service industry. Like, kind of like a corporate team. Our customers are serving other people in a company, right? Like, or building this great experience for people there. So if you leave the company, you lose that experience, right? So it's not fundamentally different than being a server, being a bartender, being a barista, right? You're taking care of somebody, you're serving them every single day, right? And I think it's really difficult for teams like mine and even myself on how to throw a KPI at this, right? Like, or how to measure this kind of thing. I think, for some teams, that whole plot chart and measuring release times and things like that is a perfectly reasonable and sensible way to measure that. But I also think that metrics are a guide, not a hammer. And I think a lot of companies use them as a hammer, right? Back to that whole like failure, right? Like failure might mean downtime, and downtime means it impacts your metrics, right? And then you create this kind of self-perpetuating cycle of like, we won't do anything that can possibly cause downtime because, you know, we serve the almighty God of nines, you know what I mean? Like, and that's something that I have constantly had to kind of like butt my head against, right? Of going, well, how do you measure your team success? I'm like, well, sometimes it's just we kept the lights on, you know what I mean? Like, the last 2 years, it was like, well, you know what? Everyone managed to like work from home and the whole place didn't explode upon itself and people's laptops, you know, did the job. Check mark. You know what I mean? Like, and that was like a KPI that you would have never had 4 years ago, right? And so I think I don't really have a really well-formed opinion other than I hate metrics in some degree because I think that businesses, in so much as they serve shareholders too much in some ways, can become too metric driven. And that's something that I think breeds the kinds of teams that we all talk about earlier in this kind of chat about disliking, or like the problem teams, right? Of just that only relentlessly focused on your number or your uptime or your KPIs. And so again, that breeds out creativity. It beats out, you know, whimsy. It beats out any kind of, you know, thinking of anything that might possibly detract from that. And then you also get like the people, again, that's how you create Atlas engineers, right? Like, well, without me, if I'm not constantly doing this, the service goes down. And then you have a problem with psychological safety because that person burns out. And then you're like, oh gosh, now we got to, you know, now my biggest risk on my team is Carl. You know what I mean? Like, you know, so, you know, like, what do you do about that? You know, like, and I think that's a problem. Oh, poor Carl.
Oh, Carl.
You know, like, so when people like Tara talk to me, right? Like, what keeps you up at night? And I'm like, Carl getting hit by a bus. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a bad place to be. Poor guy.
I also think there's something to be said about, we forget the qualitative metrics too. Because it's a lot of like, what is a KPI, OKRs, all of that kind of stuff, right? But I think one of the things that is such a beautiful sign, actually, of really great leadership on teams is that nobody's coming to you anymore. Right? And so can you put, oh, well, I used to have 10 conversations and I have 0. Like, sometimes it's also a feeling, but, you know, to Myron's points, things are still happening. It's not that they're not coming to you anymore. It's that the output is still happening, right? Or that feedback conversations are happening without you. And you just heard kind of haphazardly over here that it happened, you know? And so there's also still a lot of, interaction things that you can start to see that you might not be able to put in checkboxes. But ideally, amazing teams are just having conversations without you, and they're having really great conversations without you.
But where will I get my meeting from as a manager, Tara?
I mean, do we have another podcast?
You know how many podcast / therapy sessions we're going to have after this conversation.
Joseph went there.
Sorry. I'm sorry. It's too early for that kind of flaming. I'm sorry.
Divya, let me throw it over to you. You wanted to say something.
Yeah, this is the thing. I have experienced my own personal experience I can share in terms of metrics, right? Like, I was a person who was not keen on the metrics initially, and the recent past I have changed my mind. So how I use, we do track a lot of metrics at the team level, from the customer perspective as well, and then from overall what Myron was saying, the team health itself, right? So one thing I have seen is these metrics help us to change behaviors. So if you use those metrics, and you know, I don't track anything that my team don't know. I make sure everything is visible to everyone, and every week we bring back numbers and then we see what's happening. We look at the trend, then the number itself, and then see what can we do, and discuss in our retro meetings what is that we need to change here. And if it is impacting customer, yes, that's a higher priority. For example, web performance, we track it every week. And then if there is, from March, we are seeing spikes here, what's happening here? If it is team level, like pull request, or how much did we plan and how much did we deliver? Like, is there anything that we need to learn in terms of our estimation? And so every metric is a conversation. It helps us to start the conversation, and the outcome is change in behavior.
KPIs. So I mentioned a few earlier, but like those KPIs are entirely dependent on the team, and it's a conversation. Like the team is in the conversation. So like the EMPS, like you actually ask people, hey, like how are things going? And it's not only a situation where it's like, all right, okay, cool. We're going to check PRs. We're going to check defect failure closures. We're going to check these things, blah, 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 blah. There have to be conversations. There need to be points in which you have conversations. Like if you're meeting with people regularly to talk about the work, by the way, that's talking about the work is different than talking about the person and talking about the team and talking about the project or the product or the blah, 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 right? That segmentation was
Systems,
important.
Yeah.
But like, it's a conversation. They have to be a part of it and understand that it's a conversation and be empowered to actually have the conversation. If you tell someone it's totally cool to vent and they yell and swear, they shouldn't immediately be written up, right? Like, so it's a conversation that people are empowered to participate in, and there's equity in that conversation as well.
How much does a team need a leader? What if they didn't have one?
So you're talking about the person that leads? Because I tend to believe that leadership comes from everywhere.
So that's an interesting question. Particularly in technology, teams have managers or someone in some position that has some authority. Particularly if you're in Agile, the Scrum Master can also be the nominated leader. These are your reports, etc. You do the performance evaluation, all of that sort of stuff. Can you have, in a corporate workplace, can you have a team that does not have a direct manager and have it or more abstract than that?
Well, can you or should you? I think the real question you're getting at is the difference between a capital L leader and a lowercase L leader. There are all kinds of lowercase leaders all over a company, and there's all kinds of these, you'd call them institutional, knowledge holders or gatekeepers, right? Oh, they've been here since the dawn of time. They were the third hire here. They just know how everything works, right? Like there's always one or two of those, or this person just really knows how to get things done here, so talk to her. You know what I mean? Like that's your lowercase leader, right? But more and more companies these days are in matrix type environments, right? Like I joke that like I have a boss, like I have a solid line boss, but really it's anyone who's mad at me at the moment. You know what I mean? Like anyone who's yelling at me is my immediate supervisor, right? Like, so I absolutely think that you have tons of these kind of informal lowercase leaders, right? Mm-hmm. But on a long enough timeline, there needs to be some kind of person that's deciding what direction that everyone's going in. Otherwise, you get a bunch of people rowing in different directions. Some people don't even have a row, like, I'm like, that's really great, Carl, but that's a rake. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to get anywhere with that. And so, you've got to have someone that sets the pace. It doesn't have to be a dictatorship, but it can be a democratically elected leader. And I think that's something that without someone saying, we're going here, you get a lot of really great ideas that go nowhere and people burn out and they leave.
So let me put this scenario out. So let's say you need to create a new team from scratch. Now, in terms of the structure of the team, it's open. Do you hire a manager for that team? They have to deliver something, right? The whole purpose of the team is to deliver projects, systems, services, software, whatever it is. Do you hire a manager and then get that manager to hire people in the team and then go from there? Or do you hire people who you think would be a good team and then see what leadership builds out from that?
I'm so curious about Myron's perspective.
I was like, I don't want to say the first thing.
He's just ready to jump in.
Yo, yeah, Tara, like, so absolutely. So first, to the first point, for the traditional space, I would say it's absolutely possible to build a team without considering the authoritative or the person that is, accountable. If you structure the team so that the entire team is accountable and you tie their performance based on their commitment and their delivery in accordance with that performance. And if they do what they say they're going to do, and they agree to a certain standard of care, and they've done that, even if we failed, the team is performing. But I build teams typically around the work. I look at the system, I look at the capabilities that are needed, and I bring people in that understand exactly what we're trying to do and what their role is in it. If we bring people in based on what they bring, like who they are, the experience they come in with, what they own as a part of that system, and what they're accountable for performance, you can solve a lot of the issues up front. I was talking to a head of engineering a couple weeks ago, and he had his first hires at their startup, and he was like, "Yo, we actually got two senior engineers for a startup company with like 5 people in Toronto. Is huge because they were really committed and like they could sell like here's what we're doing and why." But they had to actually there was high attrition. And I told him, I was like, dude, I told you had to be sure about what they were accountable for performance. He's like, yeah, man, like I didn't know what that meant. I thought that if a senior engineer comes in and I hired a great person and I say, do this thing until it fixes, it works, that they would do that. It's, nah, dude, like you have to have it right. Just like you said that, right? You have to have, right? Like you had, like,
I love
who
that
you
head
are, who you
nod.
bring. And this can align with being very purposeful, being a leader as a coach, blah, 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 right? Like all those things are aligned with what they bring with their own. But when it comes to being accountable for performance, a part of that is how well the team does. And a part of that is how the individual, as far as their commitments that they've made, contribute to the smooth operation of that team.
Yes, I have seen teams where there was no manager or leader. Um, and I have, one thing I have noticed is, yes, it can be possible if it is a short term and where the vision is very clear. Like they are formed to do a spike, quickly experiment something, a quick release, and then they dismantle the team. Yeah, so it's more of a working group um, slash team kind of a thing. But in the long term, I would say yes, we need a leader. We need someone who has that vision, who matches the number of personalities within the team right now, not just personalities, that their experience, their capability, and then constantly look for gaps. And then when they are hiring, what what kind of a person would add more value to my team? What is that it is required? Someone who has that clarity. And also, one thing is that, and another thing is the prioritization. What's next? Someone who can answer that. I know it would be a group discussion, but someone who pulls everyone into the room to ask that, what's next?
I like the way that you answered that, Divya, because it, like, to me, when you said the word leader, like in the phrasing you said it, I was like, oh, well, then the leader could be anywhere in the organization. Let's say you had a head of product and there was an architect that was running, like the principal architect and the principal product manager, and they were on a team and they were aligned to deliver a product with metrics and analytics that are going to tell if it's successful or not. Like if people are actually clicking on the thing and installing the app, boom, boom, boom. But the leadership comes from the head of product. And what that is the coaching, the nurturing, the making sure that alignment is set up, making sure that all the other stakeholders that sit outside of the team are aligned and understand and that the organization is ready for what the team can do.
I think it kind of goes back to that lowercase leader, though. I think to the original question, and one of the reasons why I shook my head no, not because I disagree with Myron at all. I think he's got an amazing point there. But no, I think thinking about it from the person up, though, not the leadership down way, not having a leader or not having a manager in place is one of the quickest ways to just burn someone out to a crisp. And I think it's a conversation of who are you willing to burn out more? That person who suddenly has a bunch of direct reports but isn't a specialist in their area, or the person who's doesn't really have a leader, doesn't really have a manager, and is spinning around just in the atmosphere with no real clarity, no real vision, no real purpose, and constantly can do no right. because they're kind of constantly always doing wrong. So you create a really shitty psychological environment for them. And I see this a lot on my side of the fence, where companies will go, hey, let's just hire an IT engineer, because suddenly we've got a bunch of people around here. Everyone's too busy to help take care of onboarding and new hires and stuff. Let's just hire a guy that can report to like the head of engineering. You know what I mean? So suddenly you've got this head of engineering that's got 2 or 3, heads of engineering underneath, or like, senior engineering managers, and then this IT guy or girl, right? And they're just kind of like, hey, I'm here. What do I do? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Just go fix Macs. And so what happens is you contribute to a really poor career development for that person, because they don't have anyone that understands what they do. This other person gets no clarity and vision around, their performance, where they want to go. No real conversation about them. They're just kind of this errand person, right? And so I think that without a leader, especially in my field, where like what I do is kind of specialized, right? Like it's technology, but it has a very specific like focus and viewpoint on that, right? And I think that's not unique to me. It's just where I'm coming from. I think, Divya and Myron and Tara all have their own variations of that in their own kind of fields, right? But I keenly believe, for example, as someone who always reports to non-technical leadership, right? Like my bosses very rarely know much about what I do. And it's my job to communicate to them, hey, look, here's what we're doing. Here's what our outcomes look like. Here's where we're going, right? And that's great for me. But if I were to imagine a group of individual contributors doing that, they would leave very quickly. They would go mad from that, right? And you'd end up being one of those places that, oh yeah, I worked there for a minute and it was really terrible. It was really shitty. Like I never got what I needed, and never got the resources that I needed. Because at the end of the day, that leader doesn't have a specialty in that field or in that kind of vertical that they're working in. And then you've just got this person that you're doing a massive disservice to, and you're contributing to a negative, perception in the marketplace, which then contributes to that harder to hire talent, and then so forth and so on. Like senior engineers or just mid-level engineers, they're not managers. They're not necessarily always able or new to, individual management or like kind of that autonomy. That's the job of a leader, to build that out and to bring that out and to do that and to guide and direct. But I vehemently disagree with like under-resourcing a team and just having a bunch of people. Now, you will see natural leaders emerge, and you'll have people that will kind of go for their cross-functional organizations all the time, right? I look at peers in my organization as leaders to me that mentor and develop me, right? That's that lowercase L, right? It doesn't really matter what their title is. That's that lowercase leader. But I will die on this hill that, you need to have a leader in place to get the kind of results that we've talked about in this so far. Because absent that, you've just got a random person who you kind of just have to cross your fingers that they're going to know what to do. And if they know what to do, that means they're senior enough that they should be a manager or a leader, that you should have hired them in the first place.
I think underlining what everyone has said, all really great points, is that you need structure and clarity. Who is providing the structure and clarity remains to be seen. You probably could put a whole bunch of people in a room, but if it's clear where you're going and the structure of who's doing what, and we know what the norms are and how we're going to behave, you probably could go for a while without someone being the leader, as long as the structure and clarity is clear, and people know what the output is supposed to look like. I agree, in the long term, it's a really bad retention strategy and a really bad career growth strategy for any of those people. But I think one of the things that stuck out to me is we're actually trying to recreate or create a new paradigm, which is going against the way that we're just naturally thinking about who's in charge or what should be in charge, right? Right now, what I see in a lot of problems of the organizations that I go in is that people have been hired to lead people. They're still individual contributors. They're not leading people well. And so they're getting it all wrong anyway. They have a really, high income that they're getting to lead people, but they're not actually leading people. They're still responsible for the day-to-day. And so I think that's such a great question, because let's flip it. Like, let's look at how we could build teams in a better way. Is there a way that we can figure out who the leader is without it looking like the Hunger Games? Right? Because I think that's really what it is I want higher income. Yeah, I'll lead people. Well, that's not a good career progression either, right? And so I think we're ripe for a reckoning with how we build teams because it's really about vision, and it's about how do we get there together and how do we work together so that we're going the same way.
Well, it's also the advent of the staff engineer, right? This is supposed to be this principal engineer, right? But they still need direction from someone, right? Just because they're like the biggest dog engineer you could possibly find, and they don't want to be a people leader. That's great.
Yeah, you can't automate and scale relationships. I'll say that one more time. You cannot automate, and I'm going to mark this clip.
Boom.
I'm stealing that.
You cannot automate and scale relationships.
Does that mean that because literally every organization I've ever been in, there is no defined what a leader is. It is what you do. This is your job. It is always, here are your duties, but it's not the same as saying here is what is expected and what the team is expecting and what everyone else is expecting from you. Because you can go into an organization and a leader of a team is essentially there to make decisions, right? They're there to run performance reviews. They're there to take the hit when things don't go well, to go to every freaking meeting that everyone needs to turn up to. And you're almost like the admin, essentially, of the team. So let's go down the whole can't scale relationships path. Maybe we're going down a rabbit hole because we probably need a whole other series or a season just to talk about what the hell a leader is. Right. But let's go down this for 1 second. So it is the expectation from a good leader, a leader of an amazing team, to be the one who is galvanizing the relationships, not just within the team, but outside the team.
Myron, you brought this up,
the leader in that case is they're like the spokesman for the team. They carry the vision. They energize that team, and they energize them, and they create an environment, the best environment for that team to do what they do. That leader shapes the problems and gives the problems to the team. And the problems are a conversation also.
You're like a combination hype man and like airport traffic controller as a leader. Like seriously, it is. Like you get on the mic, you relentlessly talk about and cheer your team on. You talk about your team to anyone who will listen. You campaign for them at all hands, and you bridge the gap and you build that empathy across the organization of what you're doing and how you're supporting others so that the organization knows what you're doing, and you build that kind of internal PR. But at the same time, you're landing planes all day long. You've got people in holding patterns. You're like, yeah, look, we're at capacity, but I'll get to you next quarter. Let's talk about that, or you're running blocker, right? But at the same time, you're the hype man / ATC, right? You're the person on the radio, but who's just like super cheerful, who's really excited to be there, and just kind of takes the hits too, right? So when an accident happens, you take all the blame and you give away all the credit. Like that's really what it is at the end of the day. Yeah. Super jazzed, radio DJ.
So when I hear that, what I think of is parent of an errant teenager in a massive family get together. Because that's exactly the job. That is exactly the job of being a parent with a bunch of other families. You are talking your kids up. You're making sure they don't get any of the blame of the shit that they pull. And you are hyping them up to the point where they have that inner self-confidence just to go do anything. And you know that they're going to make mistakes, and you know that they're going to be constant mistakes, but you know that you have that confidence that they're going to learn from it and be better on the other side of it.
I'd say the difference is there's no inherent power dynamic. As a parent, you got a little bit of that going for you. I think if you're doing this really well on a team, you've built those relationships that Myron so eloquently brought up. Because you can block and organize and do all of those things all day long, but if you're still not investing in getting to know the people that work with you and knowing that you can match what needs to be done to people's strengths, what they're interested in, what excites them, all of that, like that's next level leadership. right? Because you can lead and do, organizing if you're really good at operations and that kind of skill set. But if you're not doing the relationship thing, they're kind of just people who work with you. You really haven't gotten that really great base of trust that high performing teams need.
Yeah, it's coming in and someone's like, oh, this is a problem. We really need to figure out a way. And it's your job as a leader to be like, oh, you know what? You should talk to so-and-so on my team. I'll put you guys together because she's amazing at this and she can sort that out for you. Or, oh, you know what? We can actually fix that for you. Let's set up a meeting next week, chat with so-and-so. Let's get on the calendar because we can solve this problem for you. You know what I mean? Like, would that help? You know what I mean? They'll be like, yeah, like that's part of that role too, right? Like, you're absolutely right, Tara. Like, you don't have that. I mean, you do have that inherent power dynamic, I think, sometimes because you're still someone's supervisor, right? And I think that's a hard bridge to kind of cross at times because you want to build that trust and those relationships with your team. But at the end of the day, you still have to approve their time off or have conversations that may be hard and difficult in that coaching kind of perspective. Whereas that's still kind of the same, minus the fact that you can't just be like, Jacob, call, we're going home. You know what I mean?
Because I said so, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you can't just be like, because I said, well, you can be like, because I said so. That's
you want to use that sparingly, yes.
Yeah, that's a very hard card, right? Like, it'd be like, like, bring them on the turn, Well, I also think that it's also a part of the leader's role is to kind of go fight for your team sometimes. And I know that's a really aggressive, like, violent word to use, but there are some times in the organization that someone has to go in and tell someone to knock it off. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's something that we don't talk enough about. We talk a lot about how to be this dynamic leader, how to build teams, how to do stuff. We don't really talk about, corporate fight club, you know what I mean? Like, or how to kind of deal with kind of political battles in the workplace as a leader, because at the end of the day, those conflicts happen. Maybe it's shielding your team from something. Maybe it's standing up for your team, not taking the blame on something, right? Like, or tastefully educating other people about their opportunities in the business, shall we say. And I think that's something that, absent a leader who fights that fight for those people on behalf of them, right? And that's something that I think, I don't know what the answer is. It's probably an entire episode to talk about.
Before I want to throw one last question out there and try and come all the way back to how to build that team. What are the common traits in terms of who you hire? What do you look for? What are the things that you look for in terms of knowing whether the person is going to be good in a team, whether they can grow into it, whether they're going to perform well?
I'll start. I really love this framework I came across, and I think it's just a really great place to start. I don't think it's all of it, but I do think these are 3 really important characteristics. Are they humble? So are they giving away credit when you are interviewing them? Are they speaking more about the team? Are they using we? Do they give examples about group work? And it's not just, I did this, I did that. So humble. Are they hungry? Do they want it? And and I think more to Myron's point, like, are they really invested in like what you're trying to build? What is it that you're trying to do here? What is the why behind our work? And yeah, I can get behind it. And also just smart, not book smart, but can they do the job? Do they have the skill set? What does that look like? And how do they demonstrate what that is? I think if you hire for any of those, just one of them, like one of my earlier mistakes was that I used to hire for hungry a lot more than the other 2. And that can only get you so far, for sure. Even the smart or humble, right? Like, they can only get you so far. But if you can look for something that includes some version of all of those 3 things, I think you're on a really good path. Another point of that is that we're not going so fast that it's like we're not clear about the role. And so if you're going into a hiring and an interview and you don't know what the role actually entails, stop and go back to that first before you even
I don't think
hire
I've ever been
person.
hired for a role in the last 10 years where they've known what the
that's,
role
that's
was.
Such a mess.
Yeah, the job description stays valid for like a week, and then you're just like, wow, here we are.
It's a mess. And it's not to say that it won't shift. Like, I'm all for shifting, but you really should know at least the skill set that you're looking for. Otherwise, you're setting everybody else up for failure.
The skill set at that point, I think, is the greater than job description clarity.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I think it's okay to be like, hey, look, we don't know what this role is going to be in 6 to 12 months, but we believe it's going to have this and this and this today. And for the right person, they'll be able to come in and carve out what that looks like, because we believe there's enough smoke here. And we're like, Mia, can we find a firefighter?
That's more but that's being prepared when you're writing a JD. Like, I'll interpret in my experiences what Tara was saying is like this idea that the leader will actually put a job rec out and be like, well, I don't know exactly what I want, but I'll know when I see it. I'm going to interview 36 people. They're going to take days off of work. They're going to pay extended care. When I'm hiring for a team, frankly, I consider the leader as a part of the team when the relationships are involved. So we may not be a team working on the work, but we're a team. So I will typically hire very serious adults to work with me because I'm a child. And that relationship, so I need people also that are comfortable speaking up, because I'm literally wearing a shirt that says fail faster. And so I will be like, what's the worst that could happen? And I'll know that there's a person that sees the danger, and I'll wait. If they're comfortable saying it in the group, fine. Afterward, or if they're more comfortable saying it one-on-one, I'll be like, okay, all right, now that we've had the what's the worst that could happen situation, I'd like you to tell me, what are the 13 or 14 things that you see that are broken with this? And so we balance each other out. Like, I look for balance in the personalities so that we all get to do work that we're satisfied doing. Like, I'm a firefighter in the moment type of person. I love getting the VP needs to understand what the hell we're doing. We're going now to the meeting. I love that. I don't love, hey, can you take a look at these analytics, these 50 pages, and come up with a summary? I don't like homework type things. So I hire so that the people form an amazing partnership together.
There are so many different points in terms of how to hire, and every role's different and every team is different. It depends on the scenario you're in with the team and how much of what sort of diversity you are looking for, what sort of personalities you're looking for. The thing that I always come back to, and like I think I've hired 300 plus people, interviewed probably 1,000 or more in the last 12 years. And when I started hiring, I used to very much focus on skill sets, ability to do the job that I knew that they were doing at that present time. I've gotten to the point where I don't give a shit about any of that anymore. what I care about, because ultimately skill sets can be learned. If they know enough, skill sets can be learned. People are always afraid of hiring someone who doesn't have all of the things that they want, because it means that you have to teach them. You have to grow them. You have to have an organization set up that actually nurtures them across that. And most people don't have that sort of stuff. So it's like, I need to hire the person that's going to hit the ground running, where I don't need to be involved in that. What I look for is integrity. I look for empathy. I look for their ability to make decisions, and not that they always make the right decisions, but that there is a framework of how to make those decisions. What do I need to take on board? What questions do I ask? Am I getting to the fundamental crux of how to make a decision? Because ultimately, you cannot empower someone if you're always worried they're going to fuck everything up. And then also I ask them, tell me the stories of where you failed, always. And if someone doesn't have stories of failure, I don't think you can really trust the how they're going to handle specific situations, or that they're even pushing themselves to the point where failure just becomes a normal part of daily life, and how it works. How to be a good professional is knowing how to fail and how to draw back from that. It's like, teaching your kids about life. Like, if you raise your kids in a bubble, they are not going to handle anything that comes at them. And then I also look for personality. It's just super important. And it's become more and more and more important to me the older that I get. The people that I want to work with, I don't want them to be boring. I want them to have a personality. I want them to be able to bring that out. And introvert and extrovert is a different story. It's that they have something that they're not afraid of being themselves. And that's always important. What the team needs then, everything else is secondary to that, because everything else is, okay, can you come in here and actually add some value to it? Can you galvanize this team? Can you make this better? And can you add a voice that doesn't exist?
I'm just curious, can I ask a question here? Because I feel like we're teetering in making a lot of assumptions about people and what they're able to do. So I'm just curious because I think Divya had mentioned, are they only here for the money? Well, for some people, that's a very real physiological need. And so are we judging people based on their financial situation because they want to get a home or they want to, and I think even in terms of personality, it's like what constitutes boring or what, now I'm genuinely curious because I think where we could go is like we could potentially get into discrimination territory if we're not careful about how we measure how people are taking risk. Like if people were raised, for example, in an area where food was not a normal occurrence, this person may not be able to take risks. That's not because they weren't in organizations that embrace failure. It's just part of them not being able to do their work. So like, it's not to say that we need to be the place where everybody lands and now we're going to be a therapist for everybody. But I think there's like very real things that we need to be aware of. Like that for me is a very North American way of being. And so what are we applying that maybe we've missed or could be more open to that maybe we're not looking for the first time around?
I'd love to kind of touch on some of that as well. Like I definitely came from a very North American kind of how to be a manager growth trajectory, right? And then I went overseas and I still carry a lot of that here, right? Like that whole being constantly aware of Title VII and discriminatory practices and all those kinds of things, right? And they're great frameworks to keep in mind for anyone, you know what I mean? Like, so inherently, I think they are, a tool for good. At least for me, like I kind of hire when it comes to like values, right? One of the key things that I hire for now versus what I used to is resilience. Like, can this person just get their ass kicked and then get up and come to work the next day and still be okay with it, right? Like, because that's sometimes the day, that's sometimes the job, right? Like, but are they resilient? Can they speak about how, in the face of everything going wrong, we still pulled out a win from this by doing this? You know what I mean? Like, I try very hard not to hire jerks, right? Like, no brilliant jerks, right? But, to Tara's value point as well, like I try to hire people that are humble. Like I always say all the time, I can teach anyone how to use a computer. I can't teach someone how to take care of a customer, right? Like either you have that service mentality, that service oriented kind of like viewpoint on things, or you don't, right? And especially in the kind of like the kind of corporate IT side of the fence, like you get a lot of really snarky, really dry humor people, right? But like the snark is a coping mechanism for people who actually care quite a lot about the end result and that end customer. And it's learning what the difference is between someone who's a jerk and someone who's just real chill, but also a little like kind of like just dry humor, but is all ultimately the heart's in the right place, right? And I think that the things that Tara just mentioned are complementary, because those kinds of things, right? Like they don't have to be necessarily a discriminatory thing, but the kind of traits that I think Chris and even Myron have kind of called out as being kind of red flags, those will come out of an interview because they're motivating people in the wrong way, right? Like you can be motivated to make more money if you've come up from a place that was kind of lower income or on the poverty side of things, but still have empathy and be a great person to work with, right? Like those two don't have to be a binary, kind of either or, right? Like I want people to come to my team and make more. Like I want them to have opportunity to grow, right? And someone who's just motivated by money, in my experience, it shows in the interview process because it tends to have those kinds of other key leading indicators of they're kind of a jerk, or they're kind of just like, they don't speak in we, they speak a lot of I, they speak as if they're like, again, those Atlas engineers come out, it comes out in the interviews, right? And so I think as long as you're framing the questions and you're looking for things in such a way that's consistent across all of your interview like kind of rounds, right? Like I ask the same questions of everybody, and it's the exact same interview. Like I started the exact same way because I don't want to introduce any bias to myself, right? Like, and I want everyone to have the most opportunity they have to shine in that interview, right? Because they're supposed to be interviewing me too, right? It's also like, can we get along? Is this person a jerk? Like, I'm already annoying enough. I don't need someone else who's annoying. You know what I mean? Like, I need someone to complement the areas that I'm weak in, because that's the part of being a leader that I think is the most important, right? I don't need more me's. I need more not me's. You know what I mean? Like, because I need them to do the things that obviously I'm not great at, or the things that like I don't know how to do, And so those traits I think are super important, because those are kind of like the value lens that I tend to try to interview and hire through. And to me, it shouldn't matter what color you are, where you came from. And that's the only way that I've found that kind of scales, especially dealing with other languages. Like hiring someone in Japan and Japanese is very different, right? Like, how do you tailor that kind of process for someone who, for example, only speaks about their skills when they are like 120% expert at it, as we would think about in like, the West, when in reality they're like, oh, I'm not so good at it, right? And it turns out they're like a dynamo. You know what I mean? You're just like, whoa, where was this in the interview, right? Like, so learning how to scale these things across different cultures matters. But also, I think, through that lens, it comes out. Like, it doesn't matter if you're from Singapore, from South Korea, from India, from, Canada, like, empathy shows in that process, right? Humility shows in that process. The kind of people that say that's not my job, it shows in that process, right? And I think they should be your kind of North Star for these traits, not necessarily your hard and fast
It's a
rules.
conversation.
And that's kind of how I view how I hire people.
I actually allow them to interview me. By the time they talk to me, they're the person that can do the skills, and the team is like, look, this is the person. Because I'm like, only send me people who I can hire right after I'm done. I'm not going to waste anybody's fucking time.
Well, right. Like, why am I talking to you if you're not a good fit? Like, you're a great fit on paper. I already like you on paper. The interview is basically now yours to lose.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's like, all right, here's what we're doing. Like, what do you think? And the person in that conversation explains what, here's what I'm into. Here's what I'm going to do. Even if I'm here for the money, I'm going to tell you, I want to learn JavaScript, blah, blah, blah. I want to learn Vue 3. I'm here because that end-to-end delivery pipeline that you're building and the decisioning stuff that you're talking about and like all these terms, I want to be a part of that. I want to be the best SRE in 3 years, or a software architect in 3 years or 2 years. All right, okay, cool. You've told me things that we need, because remember, I hire based on the work and then build the team based on the people.
It has to be very contextual, right? It has to, and like you said, Tara, and let me explain before I just look like a
I wasn't trying. Like, I think before you go there, like, my job as a coach is to challenge our biases. That is the challenge. And so we have a tendency to hire people who are like,
100% understand.
It just
and
is how it is.
I will say things in these sessions just to that
backpedal. You know what I mean? Like,
that's right.
I like it.
That's right.
I like it.
How do I get the foot out of my mouth? So it is entirely contextual, and it has to be, because that's exactly the issue. That is exactly the problem. That is very easy to get into. You hire the same person. You hire the person that you want to go out to the bar with, or you want to have a water cooler conversation with, and that's where that if you can focus on things that are like higher order traits, like integrity, like empathy, being able to understand who is that person underneath, regardless of, and motivation comes into it as well, right? And motivation can come in 100 different packages. If we delve into one specific example, when I hire engineers, software developers, and their motivation is, I want to work on the latest cool tech, right? I want to build this new thing, and I want to be at the cutting edge all the time. I will never hire a person like that. Because, like Joseph mentioned before, it comes back to why are we building it? Why are we doing any of that stuff? Who cares? Who's the customer? And that's got to be the forefront. Like there has to be a motivation. It can't be the only motivation, but it has to be a motivation, because otherwise the decision-making process of that person gets warped into it. And it's like, it's the same as giving a group of people the wrong metrics or the wrong KPIs. You lead them down a path that they are going to make a decision to benefit that. And so hiring is kind of the same. It's like, what is the underlying motivation and way their set of beliefs, right, professional beliefs or personal beliefs that will lead you to a better outcome. And I think also in business, I don't know if there is a right outcome for anything, really. I think there is here is what we learned yesterday, here is how we're going to adjust tomorrow, and here is what we think is going to get better. Like everything feels like an experiment. And the reason why we have, shows like this or books written, and we are going to constantly change our minds about what looks good. And one of the things I really wanted to get to in this episode is we could talk about this in a year's time, and we may all have different opinions about that. We could talk about this in 10 years' time, and everyone's like, oh, what I was talking about back on episode 1 was full of shit. So here it is now. I know we've gone over time, and I'm probably leading to you, Tara and Myron missing dinner and nutrition. Joseph's probably got his boss like, why the hell aren't you answering my Slack messages, dude?
It's technically keeping the icon green.
Yeah,
you
right.
know, like,
it's like just move the mouse every now and again. It's like, yeah, everything's fine.
Just unlock the phone, open up Slack, keep the icon green at all
look,
costs.
it has been
you know what I mean? Like,
Joseph, are you psychologically safe?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I had no idea. I was just blinking. For those on the audio feed, I am indeed blinking rapidly.
We need like hand
no
gestures
on the audio versus visual viewers. No, I am safe, actually.
For the moment.
Fine. I know, right? Just
for
like
the moment.
To be clear.
To be clear. No, it's lovely. It's lovely. It's really great. To be clear, I am psychologically safe.
Amazing.
You can edit this part out, however, because the comedy
Awesome.
bit
Look,
is worth
thank you everyone so much
penny.
for turning up, for turning up for quite some time. This has been an amazing, very interesting conversation. There are 1,000,001 things that we can follow this up on. Thank you so much for everyone who's listening, for everyone who's watching. Thank you, Tara, for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks, Myron.
Always,
it's a pleasure.
Always, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's fun.
Thanks, Joseph. I hope you're safe. Stay safe. Stay safe.
Thanks, Chris. They can't get me in my home. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure, and thank you so much, everybody, from this call for talking points that I will do my best to attribute, but probably won't.
I've written notes,
so
and there's film evidence, so we can always get back to it. Yeah, I know.
Man,
that's right. That's
inspired
absolutely.
by them. That's how it is, right? Everything's a remix. Thank you so much, though. Really, really loved hearing your feedback as well, Tara. That's some really great stuff that I took a lot of notes as well. And Myron just has stellar talking points.
Likewise.
As well. So thank you so
I didn't
much,
get
guys.
mentioned. I never get mentioned.
Thank you.
Doesn't matter. Whatever, Joseph. Whatever, man.
Chris. Thanks for guiding the conversation. Yada yada yada. Like, you're the one that's like turning into a YouTube streamer career out of this, right? Like, I'm not going to see a dime of this click-through revenue. So like, don't act like you're hard done by.
This is not.
When you're 2 million. When
I open my gold,
remember me, all right? Remember all of us little
gold
people
play
that
button,
built
I'll be like,
your
remember
streaming business
Joseph.
off the back off. Yeah, when you get your platinum play button, remember the people that I just forgot.
This is not when Joseph is the hype man. Not right now.
This is when I'm just
Joseph
hater,
keeps
man.
me grounded.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm just a hater. Yeah, and like the thumbs down button doesn't do anything anymore. So like,
that's right.
This man
That's
has
right.
unchecked unchecked potential, and if someone doesn't just kind of bring it back down to like low Earth
Oh my
orbit
God.
sometimes,
That's
it's
what weekends are
Elon
for.
is all I'm saying.
Thank you, everyone. It has been an absolute pleasure. We will see you on the next episode, and we will see all of you together soon. All right. Thank you.